A pregnant woman, a frozen mountain road, a husband who kissed her goodbye and walked into the blizzard, expecting the cold to finish what he started. But Caroline Whitmore did not die that night. She found the phone, she read the messages, and she discovered that her husband was not working alone. His own mother had ordered the hit. What happens next is not a rescue story. It is a war, a wife against an empire, a mother fighting to save her daughter from the family that tried to erase them both. If stories about betrayal, survival, and sweet justice keep you up at night, you are in the right place. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let us begin. The snow began falling at 4 in the afternoon, soft at first, then thickening into something that looked like the start of a siege. Carolyn Whitmore stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the Whitmore estate, watching the white swirl across the mountains. Her hand rested on the curve of her stomach, 39 weeks heavy with a daughter she had already named Grace. Behind her, in the study down the hall, Marcus was on the phone. She could hear his voice through the partially open door, but the tone made her pause. It was cold, calculated, nothing like the charming warmth he showed at dinner parties. She took a step closer to the hallway, straining to hear. "Tonight," Marcus said. "The mountain road. Make sure it looks like an accident." Carrie's breath caught. She pressed her back against the wall, heart suddenly pounding. Surely she had misheard. The pregnancy had made her anxious, paranoid even. Marcus had told her so himself, many times. She returned to the window and tried to steady her breathing. The contraction that rippled through her abdomen felt like a warning, tight and deliberate. They had been coming all day, irregular but insistent. The Whitmore mansion sprawled across 12,000 square feet of mountain luxury, hand-carved banisters, imported marble, a wine cellar worth more than most houses. To outsiders, Carrie lived a dream. To Carrie, the dream had slowly become a prison with very beautiful bars. She glanced at the wall where her law degree hung, collecting dust, Columbia Law, top of her class. She had put corporations worth billions under investigation. She had made men in expensive suits sweat under oath. Then she met Marcus at a charity gala, and within 2 years, she had traded depositions for dinner parties. "You do not need to work," Marcus had said. "I can give you access to everything." What he actually gave her was isolation. Her phone calls were monitored. Her friends stopped visiting. Her own family had become distant after Marcus convinced her they were toxic influences. Now she stood in a mansion surrounded by mountains, and she could not remember the last time she had spoken to anyone who was not on the Whitmore payroll. The study door opened. Marcus walked toward her with his coat in his hands. His face arranged itself into concern, but something behind his eyes remained flat. "The storm is getting worse," he said. "Weather Service says it is going to be historic. We should drive to the hospital now, before the roads close." Carrie frowned. "My contractions are not that close yet. Dr. Patterson said to wait until they are 5 minutes apart. Dr. Patterson is not driving through a blizzard. I am..." Marcus smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Trust me, we need to leave now." She wanted to argue, but another contraction squeezed through her, stealing her breath. When it passed, she nodded weakly. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was being paranoid. As Marcus helped her into her coat, she remembered something. 3 weeks ago, she had found a phone in his jacket pocket. Not his regular phone, a second one, cheap and prepaid. When she asked about it, he said it was for work emergencies. She had not pressed further. Now she wondered if she should have. Eleanor Whitmore descended the staircase as they reached the front door. At 67, Marcus's mother still moved with the precision of a woman who had controlled every room she entered for 5 decades. Her silver hair was immaculate. Her smile was warm. Her eyes were ice. "Driving in this weather? Marcus is that wise. The baby is coming. Mother, we need to reach the hospital." Eleanor's gaze settled on Carrie's stomach. Something flickered across her face, gone too quickly to name. "Well, do be careful." She reached out and touched Carrie's arm, her grip just slightly too tight. "Both of you." Carrie forced a smile and followed Marcus into the garage. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and biting even in the enclosed space. She climbed into the passenger seat of his black SUV and buckled the seatbelt across her stomach with trembling hands. Marcus started the engine. The headlights cut through the swirling white. As they pulled down the long driveway, Carrie looked back at the mansion. Eleanor stood at the window, watching them leave. She did not wave. The gates opened automatically. The SUV turned onto the mountain road. Carrie pressed her hand against her stomach and whispered to her daughter, "It is going to be okay. We are going to be okay." She did not know yet how wrong she was. She did not know that in 30 minutes, her husband would abandon her in a blizzard to die. She did not know that the phone hidden in the center console would reveal a conspiracy that reached far beyond a cheating husband. She did not know that the next 48 hours would strip away everything she thought she knew about her life. But she would learn, and when she did, Carolyn Whitmore would remember exactly who she used to be, the woman who brought down empires, the woman who made powerful men answer for their crimes. That woman was about to wake up. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the snow. Marcus drove faster than conditions allowed, the tires hissing over patches of ice that had already begun to form. Carrie gripped the door handle as another contraction tightened around her abdomen. "Marcus, slow down. We need to beat the worst of it," he said. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Through the swirling white, Carrie watched the familiar landmarks disappear. The turnoff for the highway that led to Jackson should have appeared by now. Instead, the road narrowed. Trees pressed close on both sides, their branches heavy with snow. "This is not the way to the hospital," she said. "Shortcut. Less traffic." "There is no traffic in a blizzard, Marcus." He did not respond. The SUV climbed higher into the mountains, away from town, away from help, away from everything. Carrie's pulse quickened. The contractions were coming faster now, every 7 minutes, each one more insistent than the last. "Marcus, turn around, we are almost there, almost where there is nothing out here." The road opened into a small clearing surrounded by dark pines. Marcus slowed the SUV and eased it to a stop. The engine idled. Snow swirled against the windows, already beginning to pile on the hood. Carrie stared at him. "Why are we stopping?" For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Then he reached across and opened the glove compartment. He pulled out a small plastic bag and removed something from it, his wedding ring. He set it on the dashboard with a soft click. "Marcus," her voice shook. "What are you doing?" "The car stalled," he said flatly. "I need to go find help." The car did not stall. The engine is still running. He turned the key. The engine died. The heater fell silent. The cold pressed in immediately, hungry and patient. "It stalled," he repeated. He opened his door and stepped out into the blizzard. Carrie fumbled with her seatbelt, her hands clumsy with fear. "Marcus, wait. Do not leave me here." "Marcus." He shut the door. Through the frosted window, she watched his shape move away from the car, walking into the white with the easy stride of a man who knew exactly where he was going. He did not look back. Not once. Carrie screamed his name until her throat burned. The wind swallowed every sound. Within seconds, he had disappeared into the storm, leaving nothing but swirling snow and terrible silence. She tried the ignition. Nothing. She pressed the button again and again. The dashboard stayed dark. Think. Think like the lawyer you used to be. She remembered seeing Marcus lean toward the lower dashboard before they left. She reached down with trembling fingers, feeling beneath the steering column. Her fingertips found an empty slot where a fuse should have been. He had disabled the car. This was planned. A contraction slammed through her body, so intense she doubled over. When it passed, she was shaking violently, from cold and fear and the terrible understanding that was settling into her bones. Her husband had brought her here to die. She reached for her phone with numb fingers. No signal. Of course not. He had chosen this spot carefully. The center console, the burner phone. She opened the compartment and found it wedged beneath some papers. The screen lit up when she touched it. Dozens of unread messages filled the display. She opened the first one. Sent from someone named Sloan. "Tonight is perfect. The storm will hide everything." The next message made her stomach turn. "After this, we can finally leave together. Vancouver's waiting." She scrolled faster, her vision blurring with tears. Message after message revealed the affair, the planning, the cold calculation of her murder. But it was not the messages from Sloan that shattered her. It was the messages from Eleanor. The prenup does not matter if she is dead. The company stays in the family. Do what needs to be done. And then, the one that stopped her heart. She knows too much about the offshore accounts. She helped you set them up. Marcus, she is a liability. Handle it. Muck. Engagement hook 25% mark. Maybe you have felt that moment when you realize the person you trusted most has been lying to you. That cold shock in your chest when the truth finally breaks through. Drop a comment and let us know if you have ever had someone betray you like this. Carrie stared at the screen as another contraction ripped through her body. This was not just about an affair. This was about $200 million in Whitmore family assets. This was about the legal documents she had helped Marcus prepare. The offshore accounts she had unknowingly structured for fraud. She knew too much, and now they wanted her silenced. Warm liquid rushed down her legs. Her water had broken. She was going to die out here. They were both going to die. No, no, she was not going to let them win. With shaking hands, she opened her own phone. No signal for calls, but the camera worked. She photographed every message on the burner phone, screen by screen, page by page. Then she composed an email to 3 addresses, her own backup account, her estranged best friend Mary, and her old law professor at Columbia. She typed, "If I die tonight, this is why. Marcus and Eleanor Whitmore tried to kill me." She attached every photo and hit send. The email would go out the moment she found a signal. Insurance. Just in case. Through the snow-covered windshield, headlights appeared in the distance. Someone was coming. Friend or enemy. She did not know, but she was out of options. The headlights grew brighter, cutting through the white in twin beams that made Carrie shield her eyes. She pressed herself against the passenger seat, unsure whether to hope or hide. The vehicle stopped beside the SUV. Through the frosted glass, she saw a figure step out. Large, male, moving toward her with purpose. A fist knocked on the window. Then a weathered face appeared, squinting through the glass. 60s, gray beard, eyes sharp with concern. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She tried to speak but only managed a weak sound. Her body was shutting down, conserving heat it no longer had. The man tried the door. Locked. Without hesitation, he pulled off his coat, wrapped it around his elbow, and broke the window near the edge. Glass scattered across the seat as cold air rushed in. "Easy now." He reached in and unlocked the door, then pulled it open. "I'm Walt. Can you move?" "Baby," she managed. "Coming." "I know. I can see. We need to get you warm right now." He lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. The storm attacked them immediately, snow stinging her face as he carried her to his truck. He settled her into the passenger seat and wrapped her in a thick fur-lined coat from the back. The heater was running, warmth pressed against her frozen skin like a blessing. Walt climbed into the driver's seat. "How far apart are the contractions?" 5 minutes, maybe less." He nodded grimly and put the truck in gear. "Hospital in Jackson is 40 minutes in good weather. In this mess, we might not make it." "No." The word came out stronger than she expected. "Not Jackson, not the main hospital. Ma'am, you need medical attention right now. The sheriff is on their payroll." She gripped his arm with surprising strength. "My husband's family. They own half this county. If you take me to the main hospital, I am dead." Walt studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there made him believe her. "There is a small clinic in Wilson. 20 minutes. Doctor there owes me a favor. Please." He turned the truck and headed down the mountain. The tires fought for traction on the icy road, but Walt handled the vehicle with the confidence of someone who had driven these mountains for decades. "What happened out there?" he asked. Between contractions, Carrie told him the messages, Eleanor's involvement, the conspiracy to kill her for the money she knew too much about. When she finished, Walt was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice rough. "My daughter, Rachel, she married a rich man too. Denver real estate family. He hit her. She called the police. They took his side because his father donated to their pension fund." He paused. "She died 3 years ago. Fell down the stairs. Ruled an accident." Carrie watched his profile in the dim light. "I am sorry. I was a homicide detective for 30 years. I know when a fall is not a fall, but I could not prove it. The system protected him. His hands tightened on the wheel. Not this time. Not again. The clinic appeared through the storm, a small building with lights glowing through the snow. Walt pulled up to the entrance and helped Carrie inside. A nurse met them immediately, eyes widening at the state she was in. "She is in labor," Walt said. "Hypothermia, and there are people looking for her who should not find her." The nurse asked no questions. She guided Carrie to a bed, started an IV, and called for Dr. Patterson, the same doctor Eleanor had criticized. He arrived within minutes, calm and competent. "You are fully dilated," he said after examining her. "This baby is coming now." The next hour blurred into pain and pressure and the primal work of bringing life into the world. Walt waited outside. The nurse held her hand, and when Grace finally emerged, screaming and perfect, Carrie wept with a joy so fierce it burned away the cold still lingering in her bones. "She is healthy," Dr. Patterson said, placing the baby on her chest. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, strong lungs. Carrie held her daughter and felt something shift inside her. Not just the love, though that was overwhelming. Something harder, sharper. She had survived. They had both survived. And now she was going to make every single person who tried to kill them pay. Her phone buzzed. 1 bar of signal. The email she had sent from the mountain road had finally gone through. She checked her messages and found a reply from Mary. "Carrie, what the hell are you? Okay, I'm coming to Wyoming. Do not trust anyone. I love you." The door opened. Walt stepped inside, his face grave. "We have a problem. Sheriff Hargrove just pulled up outside." Sheriff Thomas Hargrove walked into the clinic like he owned every square inch of it. His boots left wet prints on the tile floor as he approached the front desk, badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Behind him, 2 US deputies flanked the entrance like sentinels. Carrie heard him before she saw him. The heavy footsteps, the authoritative voice demanding to know which room held the Whitmore woman. Her stomach tightened as she pulled Grace closer to her chest. Walt moved to the doorway, blocking the view into her room. His posture shifted into something defensive, the stance of a man who had spent decades confronting threats. "Mrs. Whitmore," Hargrove appeared in the doorway, his smile wide and practiced. "Thank God you are safe. Your mother-in-law has been absolutely frantic with worry." Carrie studied his face. The concern looked real enough to fool most people. But she had spent years reading witnesses and defendants, learning to spot the microscopic tells that betrayed deception. His eyes were too steady, his smile too controlled. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Small town. Word travels fast when someone gets rescued from a blizzard." He stepped into the room, his bulk seeming to absorb all the available space. "Let us get you transferred to the Whitmore Memorial Wing. Better facilities, private rooms. Your family is waiting to see you." The Whitmore Memorial Wing. Carrie knew the building well. Eleanor had funded its construction 10 years ago, part of her ongoing campaign to embed the family name into every institution in Teton County. The wing had its own entrance, its own staff, its own security system, its own rules. "I am perfectly comfortable here," Carrie said. Hargrove's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "Ma'am, you just gave birth during a blizzard after suffering severe hypothermia. You need proper medical attention. Dr. Patterson here runs a fine clinic, but he does not have the resources of a full hospital wing." He turned to Dr. Patterson, who stood near the monitors with his arms crossed. "Prepare Mrs. Whitmore for transport. I will have the ambulance pull around." Dr. Patterson did not move. "Sheriff, the patient has clearly expressed her preference to remain in my care. I cannot authorize a transfer without her consent." "Cannot or will not?" "Both." Hargrove's expression hardened. He took a step toward the doctor, lowering his voice to something that sounded almost friendly but carried an unmistakable edge. "Dr. Patterson, I would hate for the county health inspector to discover violations at this facility. Expired medications, improper storage protocols, the kind of things that could result in suspension of your license pending investigation." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Patterson's face paled, but he held his ground. Walt stepped forward. "She said she is staying, Sheriff." Hargrove turned slowly, appraising Walt with cold calculation. "Walt Brennan, the retired detective who moved to the mountains after his daughter's unfortunate accident. Still chasing ghosts. I see. Still waiting for justice. Justice, Hargrove laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the clinic walls. That is a beautiful word. Here is another one: obstruction. Interfere with this transfer, and I will have you arrested before you can reach your truck. Carrie's mind raced through options. Physical resistance was impossible. Legal appeals would take time she did not have, but she still possessed one weapon they had not anticipated. Sheriff Hargrove, her voice cut through the tension with the precision she had once used in courtrooms. Before you take me anywhere, there is something you should know. He turned to face her, eyebrows raised in polite condescension. I have already transmitted evidence of the conspiracy to kill me, screenshots of every message between my husband, his mistress, and his mother. Time-stamped, verified. If I disappear tonight, those files go public within the hour. Hargrove's smile froze. 3 separate recipients, she continued. A journalist with a national platform, a law professor who specializes in criminal conspiracy, and a secure backup server that even I cannot access remotely. You can take me to the Whitmore wing. You can make me vanish. But you cannot stop what I have already set in motion. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft beeping of the monitors tracking Grace's heartbeat. Then Hargrove pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway. Through the partially open door, Carrie could hear fragments of urgent conversation. Words like complication and she sent evidence drifted back. When he returned, the false warmth had disappeared from his face entirely. What remained was something colder, more businesslike. Your mother-in-laws would like to speak with you directly. He extended the phone toward her. Carrie took it, her hand steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Eleanor's voice came through the speaker, smooth as polished marble. Caroline, that was quite clever. I always said you had a sharp mind. It is a shame you have chosen to use it so unwisely. What do you want, Eleanor? I want you to come home. We can discuss this situation like civilized adults. Those emails are inconvenient, certainly, but they prove nothing without physical corroboration. And physical evidence has a way of disappearing when properly motivated individuals become involved. You tried to have me killed. Marcus made an impulsive decision. He has always been prone to dramatic gestures. But that is behind us now. I am offering you a path forward. Surrender custody of the child, sign the divorce papers my lawyers have prepared, and disappear. You will receive a settlement very generous enough to start over anywhere in the world. And if I refuse, Eleanor's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, intimate and terrifying, then you will not leave Wyoming alive. And your daughter will be raised as a Whitmore, surrounded by every advantage this family can provide. With or without your cooperation, that child belongs to us. Carrie ended the call and handed the phone back to Hargrove. She looked at Walt, then at Dr. Patterson, then at her daughter sleeping peacefully against her chest. Tell Eleanor I will come to the estate, she said, but not as a prisoner, as a witness. The ambulance ride to the Whitmore Memorial Wing felt like a procession toward execution. Carrie lay on the stretcher with Grace bundled beside her, watching the snow-covered landscape scroll past the small windows. 2 paramedics sat nearby, their faces carefully neutral. Sheriff Hargrove followed in his patrol car. Walt had been forced to remain at the clinic, threatened with immediate arrest if he attempted to follow. The Whitmore Memorial Wing occupied the entire east side of Jackson Medical Center. Separate entrance, separate parking, separate everything. Eleanor had designed it that way, ensuring that anyone admitted to her wing existed in a bubble entirely under family control. They wheeled Carrie through gleaming corridors lined with artwork worth more than most homes. Nurses in crisp uniforms nodded respectfully as she passed. Everything looked pristine, professional, caring. Everything was a lie. Her room was on the 3rd floor. Corner unit with windows that did not open and a door that required keypad access. A private bathroom, fresh flowers on the nightstand, a flat-screen television mounted on the wall, a beautiful prison cell. You will be very comfortable here, the attending nurse said as she adjusted Carrie's IV line. Catherine Pierce will be handling your care personally. She is the best in the state. I want to keep my phone. The nurse's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Hospital policy requires all personal electronics to be secured during your stay. Electromagnetic interference with medical equipment? That is not a real policy. It is now. The nurse removed Carrie's phone from the bedside table and slipped it into her pocket. Try to rest. You have been through quite an ordeal. She administered something through the IV before Carrie could protest. Within minutes, the edges of the room began to blur. Her eyelids grew impossibly heavy. She fought the sedation with everything she had, but her body had already endured too much. The cold, the labor, the fear. Now the drugs were pulling her under like water closing over her head. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a figure entering the room. Silver hair, midnight blue dress, eyes like chips of ice. Eleanor. When Carrie woke, the room was dim. Evening light filtered through the sealed windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Her head felt stuffed with cotton, thoughts moving slowly through the pharmaceutical haze. Eleanor sat in the chair beside her bed, holding Grace. She has the Whitmore eyes, Eleanor said, not looking up. The same shade Marcus had as an infant. It is remarkable how genetics assert themselves across generations. Carrie tried to sit up, but her limbs refused to cooperate. Give her to me. In time. First, we need to discuss your situation. Eleanor finally raised her gaze, her expression pleasant and utterly without warmth. The emails you sent have been addressed. Your journalist friend received a visit from our legal team. The threats of defamation litigation were quite persuasive. The law professor has accepted a substantial donation to his research fund in exchange for deleting your message. And your backup server was accessed by professionals who specialize in such matters. Carrie felt her heart plummet. You see, Caroline Schuo, you were never quite as clever as you believed. You married into this family thinking you could navigate our world. But the Whitmores have survived for 4 generations by eliminating threats efficiently and completely. You are simply the latest obstacle requiring removal. The FBI will investigate. Eleanor laughed, a sound like crystal chiming. Darling, I have dined with 3 FBI directors. I have contributed to the campaigns of senators who oversee their budget. Do you honestly believe they will take the word of a woman suffering from postpartum psychosis over mine? She stood, still holding Grace, and walked to the window. Here is what will happen. Tomorrow morning, you will sign custody documents transferring parental rights to Marcus. Then you will be moved to a psychiatric facility for evaluation. The doctors there are old friends of the family. They will ensure you receive appropriate treatment for as long as necessary. She turned back, silhouetted against the fading light. By the time anyone thinks to ask questions, you will be so heavily medicated you will not remember your own name. Please, Carrie hated the weakness in her voice, but she could not stop it. She is my daughter. She is a Whitmore, and Whitmores remain with family. Eleanor placed Grace in the bassinet near the bed, just out of Carrie's reach. Sleep well, Carolyn. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day. She walked to the door and paused with her hand on the frame. For what it is worth, I am sorry Marcus handled this so clumsily. Abandoning you in a blizzard was needlessly theatrical. There were cleaner options. But then, my son has always preferred drama to efficiency. The door closed. The lock engaged with a soft electronic beep. Carrie lay in the darkness, tears sliding down her temples into her hair. Everything she had prepared had failed. Every safeguard had been neutralized. Tomorrow they would take her daughter and bury her in a facility where no one would ever find her. Then she heard it, a soft tap at the window, then another. She turned her head, certain the sedatives were causing hallucinations. But the sound came again, insistent and real. A face appeared on the other side of the glass, 3 stories above the ground. Female, 40s, wearing what looked like a maintenance worker's uniform. The woman held something up against the window. A badge? Deputy Ruth Callahan, Teton County Sheriff's Department. She pointed at the window latch and made a twisting motion. Carrie did not understand how Ruth had reached the 3rd floor. She did not care. Adrenaline surged through her body, burning away the fog of sedation. She forced herself upright, ignoring the screaming protest of her exhausted muscles. The window latch was stiff but functional. She twisted it with trembling fingers. Cold air rushed in as the window swung open. Walt sent me, Ruth whispered. We have 4 minutes before the next walk of security sweep. Can you move? I can do whatever I need to do. Ruth helped her climb through the window onto a narrow maintenance platform. A service ladder descended to the parking lot below, barely visible in the gathering darkness. "The baby," Carrie said. Ruth was already moving back through the window. She emerged seconds later with Grace bundled in blankets, handing her carefully to Carrie. "Go, I will be right behind you." Carrie descended the ladder with her daughter pressed against her chest, moving with a strength she had not known she possessed. Each rung brought her closer to freedom. Each second carried her further from the gilded cage Eleanor had prepared. At the bottom, a truck waited with its engine running. Walt sat behind the wheel, his weathered face tight with determination. She climbed in. Ruth followed. The truck was moving before the doors fully closed. "Hargrove will have roadblocks up within the hour," Ruth said. "I know a back road to Walt's cabin. The Whitmores do not know it exists." "Why are you helping us?" Carrie asked, still breathless from the descent. Ruth stared straight ahead, her jaw set. "Because I became a deputy to protect people, not to help wealthy families commit murder." The truck disappeared into the mountain darkness, carrying Carrie toward the only safe place left in Teton County. Walt's cabin occupied a hidden hollow between two ridges, accessible only by a dirt road that did not appear on any map. He had purchased the property 30 years ago with cash, registering it under a corporate name that could not be traced back to him. After Rachel's death, he had transformed it into a refuge completely off the grid. Inside, a wood-burning stove filled the single large room with crackling warmth. The walls were lined with books, maps, and photographs from his decades in law enforcement. A police scanner hummed softly in the corner, monitoring local frequencies. Ruth made coffee while Carrie settled onto a worn leather couch with Grace. The baby had slept through the entire escape, oblivious to the danger surrounding her. Carrie envied that peace. "They will find us eventually," Ruth said, handing her a steaming mug. "Hargrove has resources. Eleanor has more. This cabin buys us time, not safety. Then we need to move faster than they expect." Carrie looked up, and something in her expression had changed. The fear remained, but beneath it, a harder edge had emerged. "I spent 6 years prosecuting financial crimes. I took down corporations with armies of lawyers and unlimited budgets. The Whitmores are powerful, but they are not invincible. They just believe they are." Walt leaned against the window frame, watching the snow fall through the darkness. "What do you need, Cohen? Evidence. The text messages prove intent, but Eleanor was right about one thing. Screenshots alone are not enough. I need physical documentation, financial records, signed authorizations, proof of the offshore accounts I helped Marcus establish." She paused, her jaw tightening at the memory. "All of it is stored in Eleanor's private vault at the estate." Ruth shook her head. "Breaking into the Whitmore mansion is suicide. Security there is military grade. Motion sensors, thermal cameras, armed guards around the clock. I do not need to break in." Carrie met her eyes. "I know the codes, every one of them. They never changed the access protocols because they never imagined I would survive to use them." Before anyone could respond, headlights swept across the windows. A car was approaching up the dirt road. Walt reached for the rifle mounted above the fireplace. Ruth drew her service weapon. Carrie pulled Grace tight against her chest, heart pounding. The car stopped. A door opened and closed. Footsteps crunched through the snow toward the cabin. A knock. Then a voice, muffled but familiar. "Carrie, it is Mary. Open the damn door before I freeze to death." Carrie exhaled sharply. "It is okay. She is a friend." Walt opened the door, keeping the rifle ready. Meredith Collins stumbled inside, her dark hair tangled and her coat dusted with snow. She looked exhausted, furious, and ready for war. "You are alive." Mary crossed the room and wrapped Carrie in a fierce embrace, careful not to crush Grace between them. "I got on the first flight when I saw your email. Landed in Jackson 2 hours ago and have been driving in circles ever since. Do you have any idea how hard this place is to find?" "That is the point, yeah." Carrie pulled back, studying her friend's face. They had not spoken in 18 months, not since Marcus had convinced her that Mary's journalism career made her a liability. "I thought you hated me. I thought you had lost your mind marrying that snake. Turns out we were both right." Mary's expression hardened. "Tell me everything." "From the beginning," Carrie told her. The mountain road, the abandoned car, the burner phone with its damning messages, Eleanor's involvement, the hospital escape. Everything. When she finished, Mary was pacing the length of the cabin, her reporter's instincts fully engaged. I can destroy them. I have the platform, the audience, the credibility. But screenshots are not enough. I need documents, bank records, something physical that proves the fraud beyond any reasonable doubt. Then help me get into that vault. They planned through the night. Ruth provided detailed information about security patrol schedules and police response times in the area surrounding the Whitmore estate. Walt sketched the property grounds from memory, marking entry points and blind spots he had identified during his own quiet surveillance over the years. Mary established secure communications with her editor, preparing the digital infrastructure needed to publish the moment they obtained proof. At dawn, Carrie's phone buzzed. She had retrieved it from her belongings before escaping, tucking it into her coat during the chaos. The screen showed an unknown number. She answered cautiously. Hello, Mrs. Whitmore, my name is Sloane Davenport. We need to talk. Carrie's blood turned to ice. The mistress, the woman whose messages had helped plan her murder. I have nothing to say to you. You have everything to say to me. Sloane's voice was calm, professional, nothing like the flirtatious tone in her text. Because I am the reason you are still alive. Meet me at the diner on Route 89 in 1 hour. Come alone, and tell no one about this call. The line went dead. Carrie stared at the phone, her mind racing through possibilities. This could be a trap. Sloane could be working with the Whitmores, trying to locate her for another attempt on her life. But something in the woman's voice suggested otherwise. A tension that did not fit the profile of a confident conspirator. Who was that? Walt asked. Carrie made her decision. Someone who might change everything. She left the cabin before anyone could stop her, driving Walt's spare truck down the mountain toward Route 89. The diner was nearly empty when she arrived. Sloane Davenport sat in a corner booth facing the entrance, her posture alert, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. Younger than Carrie had expected. Late 20s, sharp features, intelligent eyes that scanned the room with practiced efficiency. You have 60 seconds to explain why I should not call the FBI right now, Carrie said, sliding into the opposite seat. Sloane reached into her jacket and placed something on the table between them. A badge, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Sloane Davenport, Financial Crimes Division. Because I already work for them. The affair with Marcus was my cover. I have been building a case against the Whitmore family for over 2 years. Carrie felt the world tilt beneath her. You knew they were planning to kill me. I knew they were planning something. I did not know the specifics or the timing until it was almost too late. Sloane's voice cracked slightly, the first sign of emotion breaking through her professional facade. I called in the tip about your location on Mountain Road 7. I am the reason Walt was driving that route during the storm. But I should have acted sooner. I should have found a way to warn you directly. For that, I am truly sorry. When Carrie processed this information, her legal mind sorting through implications and possibilities, the woman she had spent months hating was an undercover federal agent. The conspiracy was larger than a simple affair and murder plot. What exactly do you have on them? Everything, fraud on a massive scale, bribery of local and state officials, tax evasion through shell corporations in 4 different countries, environmental crimes related to illegal mining operations. Enough evidence to dismantle the entire Whitmore empire and send Eleanor to prison for the rest of her life. Sloane leaned forward, intensity burning in her eyes. But I need one final piece, the original documents in Eleanor's vault. Without those, defense attorneys will claim everything else is circumstantial or fabricated. I was already planning to retrieve them. Then let me help you. Eleanor is hosting her annual charity gala in 3 days. 200 guests, maximum security presence, but also maximum distraction. The entire family will be occupied with appearances. It is our best and possibly only window. Carrie extended her hand across the table. Partners. Sloane shook it firmly. Partners. Mary published the first article 48 hours before the gala. The headline exploded across every news platform in Wyoming and beyond. Whitmore heir accused of abandoning pregnant wife in deadly blizzard or exclusive evidence of conspiracy. Screenshots of the messages appeared everywhere. Authenticated by digital forensics experts Mary had consulted before publication, social media erupted within hours. Hashtag Justice for Carrie trended nationally. Cable news networks dispatched crews to Teton County. The story dominated every feed, every timeline, every conversation. Marcus responded with a televised press conference, tears glistening convincingly on his cheeks. "My wife is suffering from severe postpartum psychosis," he said, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. "She has taken our newborn daughter and is being manipulated by individuals with their own agendas. Those screenshots have been fabricated or taken completely out of context. If anyone has information about Caroline's whereabouts, please contact local authorities immediately. I just want my family back." Carrie watched the performance from the cabin, Grace sleeping peacefully in her arms. The audacity of his lies no longer surprised her. What surprised her was how easily people might believe them. "He is good," she admitted. "He almost sounds convincing." "It will not matter," Mary said, her laptop open to a cascade of analytics. "The metadata on those screenshots is bulletproof. Every forensic expert I consulted confirmed they originated from his device. By tomorrow morning, his story will collapse under technical scrutiny." With Sloane paced near the window, her expression troubled. "This is moving too fast. My handler was supposed to wait until we had the vault documents before any public action. Now the Whitmores know we are coming." Ruth's radio crackled. She listened intently, then looked up with a mixture of hope and alarm. "FBI just executed a raid on Whitmore Mining headquarters. Seized computers, financial records, everything. Marcus was taken into custody 20 minutes ago." For a moment, hope flared in Carrie's chest. This was it. The federal government had finally moved against the family. The nightmare was ending. But Sloane's face had gone pale. "They moved too soon. Without the vault documents, Eleanor's lawyers will tear this apart. Every piece of evidence they seized will be challenged on procedural grounds." "The messages," Carrie said. "The forensic verification. Screenshots can be disputed. Digital evidence can be questioned. What we need is paper, original signatures. Physical proof that cannot be explained away as fabrication or manipulation." Sloane pulled out her phone, scrolling through incoming messages with increasing agitation. "This is wrong. Something is very wrong." 36 hours later, her fears proved justified. The charges against Marcus Whitmore were dismissed. A federal judge ruled that the raid on Whitmore Mining had been conducted without proper authorization, rendering all seized evidence inadmissible. Marcus walked out of the federal building in Jackson surrounded by lawyers, smiling for cameras, declaring complete vindication. Eleanor appeared beside him, composed and triumphant. "This was a witch hunt orchestrated by individuals with personal vendettas against our family," she announced. "We will be pursuing legal action against everyone involved in this shameful episode." Carrie watched the press conference with a sinking feeling in her stomach. It got worse. That night, Mary called from New York, her voice tight with controlled panic. She had been hit by a car outside her apartment building. The driver had fled. She was in the emergency room with a broken leg and 3 cracked ribs. "They came out of nowhere, nowhere," she said, her words slightly slurred from painkillers. "No plates on the car, no witnesses. Carrie, they are sending a message." The next morning, Sheriff Hargrove arrested Walt on charges of assaulting a deputy during the hospital escape. The charge was fabricated, but it did not matter. He was taken into custody, and his cabin was raided under the pretense of searching for evidence. Every document Sloane had provided was seized and destroyed, and then came the final blow. A court order arrived by messenger at the safe house where Carrie had been moved. Judge Patricia Winters, a longtime recipient of Whitmore charitable donations, had granted Eleanor emergency custody of Grace Whitmore pending psychiatric evaluation of the mother. "This is not legal," Carrie said, her hands shaking as she read the document. "They cannot take my child based on accusations alone." "They can when they own the judge," Ruth said quietly. 2 hours later, social workers arrived accompanied by deputies. Carrie fought. She screamed. She threatened legal action that everyone knew would take months to materialize. They took Grace anyway. Her daughter's cries echoed through the safe house as the car pulled away, carrying her toward the Whitmore estate and the grandmother who had orchestrated her mother's murder. Carrie collapsed on the floor, sobbing so violently she could not breathe. Everything was gone, every ally neutralized, every piece of evidence destroyed. Her daughter in the hands of the woman who had tried to kill her. She had lost. Ruth knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders firmly. "Carrie, listen to me. This is not over. It is over. They won. They took my baby. No, they think they won. There is a difference. Ruth forced Carrie to meet her eyes. Eleanor is planning a victory celebration at the gala tomorrow night. She believes she is untouchable. She believes she has eliminated every threat. She has eliminated every threat. She eliminated everyone except you. Ruth's voice was fierce. You survived a blizzard that should have killed you. You survived the hospital. You survived 2 attempts to silence you permanently. Are you really going to let them win now? When you are this close, Carrie stared at her through tear-blurred vision. Somewhere beneath the grief and exhaustion, something stirred. The woman she had buried during her marriage to Marcus. The prosecutor who had made billionaires weep on witness stands. The fighter who never surrendered, no matter how hopeless the odds seemed. The gala, she said slowly. Eleanor will be there. Everyone will be there, 200 of Wyoming's most powerful people. Maximum visibility. Maximum witnesses. Carrie stood on shaking legs. Then that is where we finish this. The Whitmore estate blazed against the night sky as 200 guests arrived for Eleanor's annual charity gala. Crystal chandeliers sparkled through tall windows. Luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway. String quartets played beneath ice sculptures that cost more than most annual salaries. Eleanor stood at the center of the grand ballroom, resplendent in midnight blue, accepting congratulations from politicians, business leaders, and social luminaries. Her son's charges had been dismissed. Her enemies were scattered and broken. Her granddaughter slept safely in the nursery upstairs under guard. She had won completely, or so she believed. Carrie entered through the service entrance wearing a catering uniform, her hair concealed beneath a dark wig. Ruth had provided credentials that would withstand casual inspection. Sloan waited in a surveillance van parked half a mile away, maintaining a direct line to FBI regional headquarters in Denver. The moment they had documentation from the vault, federal agents would move in. The gala provided perfect cover. Security focused on the guests rather than the staff. Carrie moved through the crowded ballroom, carrying trays of champagne she never delivered, invisible among dozens of identically dressed servers. At precisely 9:15, she slipped away from the main hall. The mansion's layout remained seared into her memory from 2 years of imprisonment disguised as marriage. She navigated servants' corridors and back staircases, avoiding cameras whose positions she had memorized during countless sleepless nights. Eleanor's private study occupied the far end of the east wing, protected by a 6-digit code that had not been changed since Marcus's father died 15 years ago. Eleanor was sentimental about certain things, even while being ruthless about others. Carrie punched in the numbers her late father-in-law's birthday. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The study was exactly as she remembered. Mahogany desk polished to a mirror shine. Leather chairs positioned for intimidation. Walls lined with first-edition books worth small fortunes. And behind, a portrait of the Whitmore patriarch, a safe built into the wall that contained secrets worth far more than any book. Carrie removed the painting carefully, exposing the safe's steel face. The lock required both a numerical code and a physical key. She had memorized the code during her marriage, watching Eleanor through half-closed eyes during late-night sessions that Eleanor assumed her daughter-in-law was too sedated to observe. Finding the key was the challenge. She searched the desk drawers methodically. Nothing. She checked beneath the leather blotter, behind the antique clock on the mantel, inside hollowed-out books. Nothing. Precious minutes slipped away. The gala continued downstairs. At any moment, someone might notice her absence. Then she remembered. Eleanor's paranoia about household staff, her insistence that nothing valuable be placed where servants might stumble upon it during cleaning. Carrie knelt and examined Eleanor's chair. Her fingers found a small piece of tape on the underside of the seat. Attached to it was a brass key. The safe opened with a satisfying click. Inside, she found exactly what she had hoped for. Stacks of documents bound with rubber bands, ledgers filled with handwritten entries, USB drives labeled with dates and account numbers, and tucked in the back, an old tablet computer that Eleanor apparently used for sensitive communications. Carrie photographed everything systematically, page by page, document by document, sending copies to Sloan's secure server in real time. When she reached the tablet, she powered it on and navigated to the video files. One recording was dated 3 days before the blizzard. She pressed play. Eleanor's voice filled the study, speaking to someone off camera. The mountain road, Route 7. Make it look like an accident. The storm will provide perfect cover. She dies. Marcus inherits everything, and we eliminate the only person capable of connecting us to the offshore accounts. A male voice responded, Marcus, are you absolutely certain this is necessary? She helped you establish the fraud, Marcus. She structured those accounts. She witnessed the transfers. Do you want to spend the rest of your life in federal prison? Because that is precisely what will happen if she ever decides to cooperate with investigators. Eleanor's face appeared in frame, perfectly composed, utterly merciless. Handle it. Tonight. Carrie's hands trembled as she copied the file to her phone. I knew you would find your way here eventually. She spun around. Eleanor stood in the doorway, a small pistol held steadily in her manicured hand. Behind her, two security guards waited in the corridor. You never did know when to accept defeat gracefully, Eleanor continued, stepping into the study. Such an exhausting quality in a daughter-in-law. It is over, Eleanor. Carrie forced her voice to remain steady. FBI agents are outside. Everything in this safe is already being transmitted to federal servers. Your own words ordering my murder are on their way to every news outlet in the country. Is that so? Eleanor's smile did not waver. Darling girl, do you truly believe I would keep anything incriminating in an obvious location? Those documents are copies, planted specifically for situations like this. The originals were destroyed years ago. And that video recording, she gestured dismissively, obtained through burglary, inadmissible in any court. My attorneys will have it suppressed within hours. Perhaps. Carrie held up her phone, its camera light glowing red. But this conversation is being broadcast live to 300,000 viewers on Mary's news platform. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. I learned something from you during our marriage. Carrie said, documentation is everything, especially when it is happening in real time, witnessed by hundreds of thousands of people who cannot be silenced. The door behind Eleanor burst open. Federal agents flooded the room, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Sloan entered with them, her badge visible, her expression grimly satisfied. Eleanor Whitmore, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. Eleanor's face contorted with fury. Do you have any idea who I am? I will have every one of you destroyed. I know exactly who you are. Carrie stepped forward as agents secured Eleanor's wrists. You are the woman who tried to murder me and my daughter, and you are going to spend the rest of your life paying for it. She did not wait to watch Eleanor being led away. She was already running toward the nursery where Grace was being held. She found her daughter sleeping in an ornate crib, surrounded by stuffed animals and silk blankets. The guards had fled the moment federal agents entered the building. Carrie lifted Grace and held her close, tears streaming down her face. I am here, she whispered. Mama is here, and I am never letting anyone take you from me again. Through the nursery window, she could see the gala dissolving into chaos below, guests fleeing, police lights flashing, the fall of the Whitmore Empire beginning in real time. But one piece remained unfinished. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ruth Marcus escaped. Heading toward Route 7. He is coming for you. Carrie looked at her daughter, then at the window, then at the chaos consuming the estate. She was not finished yet. The arrest of Eleanor Whitmore would dominate headlines for months. The live stream had been viewed by over 2 million people before the night ended. News networks played the vault confrontation on endless loops. Legal experts debated the admissibility of evidence obtained during what was technically a breaking and entering. None of that mattered to Marcus. By the time federal agents secured the Whitmore estate, he had already fled through a service exit, disappearing into the mountain darkness. His accounts were frozen. His allies were scattering. His mother was being processed at the federal detention facility in Cheyenne. Everything he had built, everything he had schemed to protect, was collapsing around him. Carrie knew he would run. Men like Marcus always ran when consequences finally caught up with them. They lacked the capacity to face what they had done, preferring flight to accountability. She also knew where he would go. 3 days after the gala, Carrie drove to Walt's cabin with Grace secured safely in the car seat. Walt had been released from custody the moment corruption charges against Sheriff Hargrove became public. Ruth was now acting sheriff, systematically removing every deputy who had accepted Whitmore money. She found Walt on the porch, cleaning a rifle that did not need cleaning. He is coming here tonight, she said. Walt nodded slowly. I figured as much. Spotted his rental car on the Ridge Road about an hour ago. He is circling, waiting for dark. I need you to take Grace somewhere safe and leave you alone with him. Yes. She met his weathered eyes without flinching. This is my fight. It has always been my fight. Walt studied her for a long moment, seeing something in her expression that had not been there when he first pulled her from that frozen SUV. The frightened victim was gone. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, forged by fire into something unbreakable. He reached into his jacket and handed her a small revolver. Simple, reliable, functional. You know how to use this. I learned a great many things during my marriage that I never expected to need. He lifted Grace from her car seat, cradling the baby with surprising gentleness. At the door of his truck, he paused and looked back. My daughter Rachel never got the chance to face her monster, he said quietly. She died waiting for a justice that never came. You have the opportunity she was denied. Make it count. The truck disappeared down the mountain road. Carrie sat alone in the cabin and waited. Engagement hook, 90% mark. Sometimes the hardest thing is not fighting back. It is finding the courage to face someone who shattered your world and refusing to let them break you again. If this story has touched something in you, share in the comments what gave you strength during your darkest moments. Your story might help someone else find theirs. Marcus arrived at dusk. When the light was dying and shadows stretched long across the snow, he came through the front door without bothering to knock, a gun in his hand and desperation written across his features. The polished, charming man she had married no longer existed. What remained was something feral and cornered, stripped of all pretense. Where is my daughter, safe, far from you and everyone connected to you? You destroyed everything. His voice cracked, hovering between rage and despair. My mother is in federal custody. My accounts are frozen. I have nothing left. Nothing. You tried to murder me. Marcus. Carrie rose slowly from the chair where she had been waiting, her movements deliberate, controlled. You drove me into a blizzard at 39 weeks pregnant and walked away without looking back. What exactly did you expect would happen? I expected you to die. He raised the gun, the barrel trembling slightly. Like you should have. Like you were supposed to. Carrie's hand moved toward the revolver hidden beneath her jacket, but she did not draw it. Not yet. There was something she needed to say first, something she needed him to understand before this ended. Do you know what I learned in that storm, she asked. While I was freezing to death in the car you sabotaged, reading the messages that proved the man I loved had plotted my murder with his mother. Marcus said nothing, but she saw his jaw tighten. I learned who I actually was. Not the woman you spent 2 years convincing me I had become. The weak one, the dependent one. The wife who needed her husband to make decisions for her. She took a step toward him. I remembered the woman I was before I met you. The prosecutor who made powerful men answer for their crimes. The fighter who never surrendered regardless of the odds. You think you are so strong now? Marcus's laugh was hollow, desperate. You are nothing. You were always nothing. Just a useful tool that outlived her purpose. Then shoot me. Another step forward. Pull the trigger. Prove you are not the coward we both know you are. His hand shook more violently. You could not even kill me yourself, she continued, her voice steady as stone. You drove away and let the cold do your work for you. You hid behind your mother and her money and her connections. Because deep down, beneath all that charm and privilege, you are terrified. Of consequences, of accountability, of being exposed as exactly what you are. Shut up. A weak, pathetic man who hides behind women stronger than himself. Another step. She was close enough now to see the sweat beading on his forehead. Your mother planned everything. Your mistress was a federal agent building a case against you. Even your murder attempt required someone else to do the actual work. You are not a villain. Marcus, you are a footnote in other Millionaire stories. His face contorted with rage. He leveled the gun directly at her chest, finger tightening on the trigger. Carrie did not move, did not flinch, did not look away. Cowards do not shoot, she said quietly. Cowards run. The moment stretched into eternity. Marcus's hand trembled. His breath came in ragged gasps. Something shifted behind his eyes. Fear overwhelming anger. Self-preservation overwhelming everything else. His arm dropped. He turned and bolted for the door. He made it 3 steps before federal agents emerged from the tree line. Weapons drawn, flashlight beams cutting through the gathering darkness. "Marcus Whitmore, FBI, you are under arrest." They brought him down in the snow, pressing his face into the frozen ground he had intended to use as his wife's grave. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Sloan approached Carrie, her expression mixing relief and admiration. "You took a hell of a risk. He could have pulled that trigger." "No." What? Carrie watched as they loaded Marcus into the waiting vehicle. "I knew him better than he ever knew himself. Men like that only hurt people when they think they can get away with it. The moment consequences become real, they crumble." Marcus looked back once through the car window, his eyes filled with hatred and disbelief. Carrie did not wave. She simply watched until the vehicle disappeared down the mountain, carrying the man who had tried to destroy her toward the justice he had spent his entire life avoiding. The trial lasted 8 weeks. Federal prosecutors assembled a case that filled 300 banker boxes and required testimony from 47 witnesses. Carrie sat in the gallery through every session, Grace in the care of a trusted friend, watching the systematic dismantling of the empire that had nearly destroyed her. Eleanor Whitmore proved defiant to the end. She dismissed her attorneys and represented herself, treating the courtroom as a stage for her grievances. She accused federal agents of conspiracy. She claimed the evidence was fabricated. She insisted that Caroline was a mentally unstable woman pursuing a vendetta against a family that had shown her nothing but kindness. The jury was unimpressed. The video from Eleanor's vault played on screens throughout the courtroom, her voice calm and precise as she ordered her daughter-in-law's murder. Technical experts verified the recording's authenticity. Financial analysts traced the offshore accounts through shell companies in 4 different countries. Former employees testified about years of fraud, bribery, and intimidation. Carrie testified for 3 consecutive days. She walked the jury through everything: the isolation during her marriage, the messages she discovered in the blizzard, the hospital imprisonment, the kidnapping of her daughter. She spoke without notes, her voice steady, her eyes meeting each juror in turn. The defense tried every tactic available. They questioned her mental state. They suggested she had fabricated evidence. They implied she had seduced Marcus for his money and was now pursuing revenge after being caught. None of it mattered. The evidence was overwhelming, and the story was impossible to dispute. On a gray morning in early spring, the jury foreman stood and delivered the verdict. Eleanor Whitmore guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, bribery, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. The judge sentenced her to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Marcus Whitmore guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, flight from prosecution, 30 years in federal prison. Sheriff Thomas Hargrove guilty on all counts: corruption, obstruction, conspiracy, 15 years. The courtroom erupted as the verdicts were announced. Reporters rushed for exits to file breaking news. Spectators applauded. Eleanor sat motionless, her face frozen in disbelief. As marshals approached to take her into custody, Carrie felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a vast, echoing relief that it was finally over. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Walt waited on the steps, Grace in his arms, Ruth standing beside them. Mary was there too, still recovering from her injuries but refusing to miss this moment. Sloan approached Carrie one final time before departing for her next assignment. The undercover role that had consumed 2 years of her life was complete. "You should know that your testimony made the difference," Sloan said. "The evidence proved what they did, but you showed the jury who they really were. That is what convicted them. What happens to you now?" "New identity, new assignment, new name." Sloan smiled faintly. "The work does not stop just because we won one battle." They shook hands. 2 women who had entered each other's lives as enemies and emerged as something approaching friends. "Take care of yourself," Carrie said. "Take care of that little girl. She is lucky to have a mother like you." Sloan walked away and disappeared into the crowd of reporters and spectators, another anonymous face in the chaos of a story that had captured national attention. Carrie joined her friends on the courthouse steps. Walt handed Grace to her, and she held her daughter close, breathing in the soft, sweet scent of her hair. "What now?" Ruth asked. "Now I figure out who I am when I am not fighting for survival." The weeks that followed brought gradual transformation. The Whitmore estate was seized by federal authorities and converted into a shelter for survivors of domestic violence. Carrie attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony, walking through halls where she had felt so trapped and finding them filled with women rebuilding their lives. She understood them completely. She was one of them. Walt's cabin became a regular destination for weekend visits. He taught Grace to identify bird calls before she could properly walk. He told Carrie stories about his daughter Rachel, sharing memories he had kept locked away for years. The grief never fully disappeared, but it softened into something that could coexist with hope. Mary recovered fully and returned to journalism with renewed purpose. Her coverage of the Whitmore case won a Pulitzer Prize. She dedicated the award to every woman who had been called crazy for telling the truth. Ruth continued as sheriff, transforming the department into something the community could trust. She hired deputies based on character rather than connections. She established protocols for responding to domestic violence calls that prioritized victim safety above all else. 6 months after the trial ended, Carrie stood on the porch of a small house she had purchased with money she earned herself, consulting work for federal prosecutors on financial crime cases. The skills Eleanor had tried to suppress had become her pathway to independence. The house was modest by any standard. 2 bedrooms, a small yard, a view of mountains that no longer represented danger. Everything about it was hers alone, purchased with no assistance, no inheritance, no connection to the Whitmore name. Grace played in the grass, chasing butterflies with the unsteady determination of a toddler, nearly 2 years old now, with her mother's eyes and a stubborn spirit that manifested in everything she did. Inside, Mary was attempting to cook dinner, filling the kitchen with suspicious smells and cheerful cursing. She had relocated to Wyoming 3 months ago, claiming she needed a change of scenery. Carrie suspected the truth was simpler after everything they had survived together. Neither wanted to be far from the other. The sun began its descent toward the mountain peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Carrie watched the light change and thought about the night that had transformed everything. The cold, the darkness. The moment she understood that the man she loved wanted her dead. She had almost died on that mountain road, almost lost everything that mattered, almost disappeared into a storm that was supposed to erase her existence. But she had not died. She had survived. And in surviving, she had discovered something Eleanor and Marcus could never have anticipated. The woman they tried to destroy was stronger than the cage they built around her. The victim they created became the prosecutor who dismantled their empire. The mother they tried to eliminate became the force that protected her daughter and brought her enemies to justice. Grace laughed at something in the grass, a pure sound of joy that carried across the quiet evening. Carrie smiled and walked down from the porch to join her daughter. The storm had taken everything she thought she wanted: the wealthy husband, the luxurious home, the easy life she had convinced herself she deserved. And it had given her everything she actually needed: a second chance, a real family, a life that belonged to no one but herself. She lifted Grace into her arms and carried her inside as the first stars appeared above the mountains. Behind them, the snow began to fall again, soft and gentle against the windows. But this time she was not afraid. This time she was home.